Okay, so last video we learned a little bit about how HTML works. So remember, any HTML file is going to have HTML at the top. It's also going to tell us the type of document it is. We'll have start and end tags, so like head, and then anything within head will tell us like the title of the page, be at the top of that page, or be metadata. The body will include all that stuff in the main area. So we learned a bit about that. Now I'm going to go through saving your files and also adding some links. So the main thing we want to do is before we start adding links, it's really important to actually manage your site correctly, which means setting up the right folders and putting everything in those folders correctly just to make sure that things are linking between pages. Because if you put one page in one folder and then put another web page on a completely different folder somewhere else, then when you try and upload them at the end, things get confused and your links won't work. So it's a really important part of actually designing your site properly. So the way that we can actually do that is by managing our site. We can do that by going up to the top in here under site in the menu and choosing either new site or manage sites. Doesn't really matter too much. Be aware I've already got a couple of sites in here, so if it's the first time you've used Dreamweaver, you won't have anything in here. It'll just say nothing. The reason why it allows you to actually create more than one site, as you can see here, is that some people, especially if you're working freelance, you might be creating more than one website at the same time. And so you would need to be able to flick between those. And you obviously don't want to accidentally save files that you've been working on one project into the other one. So it means you can manage those sites and then just change over to whichever one you're working on at that time, and all your files will come up here that you can keep using. Everything will get saved to the same place in that project folder. So that's why it's really important to keep everything managed correctly. So we're going to do a new site. So manage sites, new site. You can give it a name. So I'm just going to call it, it doesn't really matter, let's call it exercises. Don't need to give it an address because we don't actually have an address for it yet. Anything like server technologies, or if it asks you where do you want to save on the network or anything like that, at the moment we just click none or no. The main reason we do that, and same here, we don't want to use a network, we just want to work on our machine, is that we don't have a server that we can upload stuff to yet. So remember when I said that I should call my first page index? The reason I call it index is that if I wanted to have a first page that everybody saw when I first came to my website, the first page is called index. And the reason it has to be called that is because when we upload things onto a server, which is basically me taking my files, putting them on someone else's computer that's always connected to the internet, and is accessible to people publicly, it means that in order for the server to know which page it should show first, it needs to say, well, I'm just going to find any file that's called index. So I'm going to assume that your first page is the index file. So if you call your first page index, the server knows that's the one to display. And that's once it goes on the network. At the moment, we don't have a server that we're going to put stuff to, so we don't need to worry about putting stuff on the network. This is the main thing you always want to check, is where are you going to save your stuff to. So if you've got a folder that you've set up, so I've got a folder called My Documents Web Design that I've already started saving to. Be aware that if you've given it a name here, it's going to want to try and make a new folder called that name. So if you've already got a folder that you've made, you can browse for it here. If you don't have a folder that you've made, then you can go ahead and let Dreamweaver create it for you. But if you want it saved in a particular spot, you might want to go and set it up here as well. So just double check that it's saving it in the right folder that you actually want it saved to. Here I've got it saved to my documents. That's up to you. Just be aware that everything should be in that one folder. Again, I don't want to use a local or network, I want to use none. And then I can click OK. Be aware that if you do end up getting server access or hosting where you can put your site up online, then you could go back and change those details so that you could actually upload it to a server from within Dreamweaver. But currently we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I've got exercises. I'm going to click done. So you can see here I've got my index file that I've already created. I've got my test file. So that's all good because that's where I saved things to before. So everything's saved in the right spot. I've got an index page, which means that's my first page. Now I can actually start to create other pages to link to. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new HTML page, and I'm going to call this page 2, and I'm going to say click to go back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one page 2, and really it's just so you can see that I can link between pages. So again, I'm going to save it, I call it page 2. And it's really important with any of these names. You can see with a lot of these, I'm making sure I keep the HTML at the end. I'm also keeping my files lowercase, one word, and generally pretty short. It's really good to avoid using spaces. If you want to use a space, put an underscore instead. And it's a really good idea to try and avoid having, like, capitals and lowercase letters, because sometimes if you burn them to a disk or something like that, they all end up being uppercase or lowercase anyway. And also it's hard to remember what you've called file names. So, I mean, you can use uppercase letters if you want, but just be consistent. I tend to just make everything lowercase, or at least for the first part of the page anyway. So there's my page 2. So now what I've got is I've got an index and a page 2. I can select the text that I want to make a link to page 2, and I could always oops, hang on, let me just go down here. So I can select it, click on my link in my properties, and drag my page 2. I should be able to drag it in there. There it goes. If it's not working, the other thing you can always do is, instead of doing that, you could type it in if you wanted to, or you could point to file and drag it up to the file you want. Or you can also browse for that file, and if it's in the one folder, it's going to try and just take you to that folder anyway. So there's a few different options for making links. So let's go and do the same for page 2. Let's go and point that to my index file so it goes back. Save both of them, and then I can preview it in a browser and see if it works. There we go. So both my links now work. And there's how you do basic links.